My name is Kaitlyn Roig Debellis, and I taught first grade at Sandy Hook Elementary for 7 years.
Okay, so can you tell us what the days were like following the incident in December 14th?
Yeah, for myself, my students and my experience on that day was so intense and so horrifying based on our proximity to it, being in the first classroom of the school, that in the days and the weeks that followed, there was so much time spent trying to find a new normal. There were two things that were very much at play during that time. One was that my sense of safety and of self and security were gone. I couldn't do anything alone. I couldn't go in public, not a gas station, not a grocery store. It was really infuriating because I had been so independent before that. And at the same time, I was grappling with all of these questions that I just couldn't answer, and they all centered around why. Why did this happen? Why our school? Why innocent lives? And eventually, after living with both of these things, no sense of security and not being able to answer all of these questions, I realized that I couldn't continue down that path, that if I did, truly all would be lost, and that I needed to refocus my energy to focusing on questions that could be answered. And for myself, there were two. How do I make sure this day doesn't define us, my students and myself? And how do we get our control back? Because it had been taken.
So what services were provided to you after the incident?
Well, for myself, independently, I sought out counsel, that of an outside therapist, and I went to her twice a week for about 6 weeks. That was completely on my own accord. Within the school setting, unfortunately, it wasn't, it's hard to explain. There were a lot of resources, and it felt as if they were thrown at us. It felt as if it was, here is this huge group of people, and it was a rotating door. People were in and out of my classroom, saying hello, meeting us, myself as well as my students, here and there for weeks at a time. And yet we didn't have anyone consistent. We didn't have anyone dedicated to us who knew us as an entity, right? My students, my 16 students and myself. We didn't have anyone who was there on a daily basis saying, okay, this is what we're gonna work on today, this is what we're gonna work on tomorrow.
Were you offered any occupational therapy services?
To be honest, I can't specifically remember that I was offered OT services. That's not to say that they weren't there. Again, to reiterate, people were flocking to our school community. I would say thousands of trained professionals came through our doors in those 2-3 months. But did those services make it to my kids and I honestly couldn't tell you, and if they did, I could pretty much guarantee that they were few and far between.
Do you feel the school system has enough mental health support from the government?
That's a very difficult question to answer. Prior to December 14th, I would have said, yes, I think so, right? Because I was living in this bubble. I was living in this bubble with my kids at, we were the #2 school in the state, and everything was going swimmingly. There were never any issues, and my kids were so happy and so well adjusted. And it wasn't until we needed support and we needed, dedicated experts that it was very clear that we didn't have that.
What qualities would you say an OT could have to provide optimal health care for individuals who have been through an experience like a school shooting?
I think for an occupational therapist or any therapist coming in after a school shooting or any trauma to assist that community, I think number one is awareness, right? So aware of what they're coming into, aware of, for instance, in our school, all of the helping, all of the therapy professionals who were coming in, they were dealing with very different populations, and I don't even know that they were aware of that, right? Everyone's experience on that day was so varied and so different. Our school was huge, and so I think awareness of who they're working with, when they're working with them, what are the needs? How were they impacted on that day? Were they, like my kids and I, literally in the center of it, feet away? Or were they distantly removed and, heard things about what happened that day, but didn't really experience anything? Because how you're dealing with those two populations is very, very different.